Om Makradunda Mahakaya Surya Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddharvame Sada Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurudevo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastama Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha.
Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha.
Atha Dvitiyodhyayaha.
Atha Dvitiyodhyayaha.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha.
Shloka number 69. Ya Nisha Sarvabhutanam.
Ya Nisha Sarvabhutanam.
Tasyam Jagarti Sanyami.
Tasyam Jagarthi Sanyami.
Yasyam Jagrati Bhutani.
Yasyam Jagrati Bhutani.
Sa Nisha Pashyato Munehe.
Sa Visha Bhashyadho Mune.
You have to read from here. A wise person cannot be emulated based on action. Since a wise person doesn't do karma, you cannot emulate him or her. You cannot say that because she or he doesn't do karma, you will not do karma. The wise person doesn't perform karma because the need to do is no longer there. Because you still need to perform karma, you cannot imitate a wise person in this respect. Krishna did not say that the wise person is one who doesn't do any karma. To say that this person has no duty whatsoever could be interpreted by a mumukshu in such a way that he or she would not live a life of karma yoga and instead would become nothing more than a lazy person. This is why Krishna pointed out here that for a wise person, night is what is day for everyone else, meaning that no karma is enjoined. When everybody is active, that is a day for the otherwise, whereas for the wise, it is night. It means no karma. For them, no karma is enjoined by the Shastram. Whether it is Shastriya karma or Lokika karma, no karma is there. Kartratvam is not there. Therefore, even if it does karma, therefore no karma only. What is the means of knowledge? Pramanam for you is not a pramana for the wise person. In fact, what Krishna was saying here is that for the wise, there is no pramana at all. Because pramana has served the purpose. Therefore, pramana has no use for a wise person. Whereas for the other wise, pramana is useful. Pramana is valid. Even the usefulness of the last pramana, Vedanta, is over for them, or for the wise person. Vedanta says that you are Brahma. Until you know this, Vedanta is a pramanam, and afterwards it too becomes mithya. With knowledge, there is no means of knowledge, known or known. The differences between these three having been swallowed. The pramana, the means of knowledge, is gone. It is Brahma, as are the pramata, the knower, and the prameya, the object to be known. The very knower is cancelled by the knowledge that says You are not a knower. Resolution of the knower, known, and the knowledge. Shankaracharya says that the final pramana, the statement tat tvam asi, itself goes away having dismissed the pramana. An example generally given to illustrate how the knowledge works is the method of using a thorn to remove the thorn that is lodged in one's foot. Once the thorn is removed, we discard both the thorns. There is also an interesting example used. When a body is cremated, a huge funeral pyre is made out of wood. If the person who died was rich, the pyre will be made of sandalwood. But this is the only difference. When the pyre is ready, the body is placed on it, covered with husks and small pieces of wood, and then the fire is lit. Once the body has caught fire, the people who came for the ritual will go away. But the ritual itself is still incomplete and continues the next day when the person performing the ritual comes to pick up the ashes and bones. This person is either the departed one's eldest son or a cousin, someone who is closely related. When this person comes to pick up the ashes, there should be no portion of the body left unburned. It must be burnt thoroughly. There should be nothing remaining but the ashes and the bones. Until this happens, the ritual is incomplete. The person in charge of the cremation ground is the one who must ensure that the body is completely burnt. Because the body is not to be touched and being in the fire cannot be handled. A stick is used for this purpose. Once the person is sure that the body is completely burnt, he throws a stick into the funeral fire. Having done its job, the stick also gets burnt. Similarly, the statement, you are that, tatutvam asi, is a pramanam. The pramata, the knower, you, the jiva is told you are Brahma. If you are Brahma, there is no knower. After this knowledge takes place, the pramata is just an as though pramata, as though knower. There is no real pramata anymore. When the knower is told you are not a knower, you are Brahma, the knower is sublated. And when the knower is not there, there is a pramana. It too goes away. All the three, the knower, the pramata, the known, the praman, the prameya, and the means of knowledge, pramana, are understood to be Brahma. All duality goes in the wake of this knowledge, including the knower, known, and the knowledge itself. The known, the prameya, is gone because there is nothing to know. When the knowledge takes place, all the three, pramata, prameya, and pramana, become meaningless. Therefore, all the knower, known, knowledge activities resolve in the wake of the knowledge that Agam Brahma Asmi. This is what Krishna meant when he said, what is day for everyone else is night for the wise person. This was alone conveyed by Shankaracharya in his commentary. All translation, therefore, should be read with this meaning in mind. Emulate the values of a wise person. Any description of a wise person of steady wisdom, Chata Prajna, is useless, really speaking. We can only talk about the wisdom, Prajna, that makes a person wise. Unless you have this wisdom yourself, you cannot understand what a wise person is. A Mahatma knows a Mahatma, whereas one who is not a Mahatma cannot appreciate a Mahatma. Therefore, any description other than an unfoldment of the wisdom that makes such a person wise is really meaningless. But still, Arjuna wanted a description. He also wanted to know how the wise person reacts to the word. In his response, Krishna told Arjuna certain things, including the fact that one cannot emulate a wise person except insofar as values are concerned. The wise person may not perform Vedic rituals. For such a person, these karmas are no longer necessary because the previous performance of these scriptural injunctions has found its fulfillment in jnana, wisdom. Whether the person has taken sannyasa or not, he or she is a sarvakarma sannyasi only because of jnana. The doership is already negated in the person, sublated in the person. There is no real doer. It's only bhadita karta. And when there is no real doer, there is no real karma. Karta nasti, karma nasti. In this way, the wise person is not bound by duty of any kind. To emulate a wise person, therefore, it is dangerous. Krishna mentioned the mind, the values, control, and mastery of a wise person because these alone are to be emulated. In this way, Krishna confirmed for Arjuna that the characteristics of a wise person as demonstrated in his or her interactions in day-to-day life, can become the means, the sadhana for a sadhaka, seeker, for a mumukshu. Finally, Krishna said that a wise person is as different from an ajnani as day is from night, meaning that there is no way of unfolding what a wise person is. What is night for all the people is day for the wise, and what is day for them is night to the wise. Arjuna was bound to be flabbergasted by this. He was definitely not going to be any wiser for having heard this particular shloka. Therefore, out of sympathy and compassion, Krishna followed his night and day example with another example, an illustration that Arjuna could hold on to, and one that would enable him to appreciate in a way what a wise person is. Next shloka, which is in Trishtup Chandas. Apuryamanamatala pratishtam
Apoyamanamatala-pratishtham
samudramapah pravishanti yadvat
samudramapah pravishanti yadvat
tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve
tatvat kamayam pradishanti sarve
sashantimapnoti nakamakami.
sashantimapnoti nakamakami.
Another beautiful shloka. The Drishtanta is given. Apuryamanam, puryamanam, filled up to the brink. Achala pratishtam, no movement. What is that? Samudram. Apaha pravishanti, yatvat. As the water enters into the ocean, which is up to the brink, and which is achala pratishtam, doesn't agitate with the inflow of water. So too, Sarve kamaha, all the objects entering into the jnani, yam pravishanti, sashantim apnoti. As the ocean is not disturbed by the water that flows into it. Similarly, this person also, wise person also, into whom all the objects enter, they doesn't cause any disturbance. They remain unchanged. Sashantim apnoti, na kamakami, not kamakami. Kamakami shantim na apnoti. Desire of objects do not gain peace, whereas akamakami, shotriyasya cha akamakatasya shantim apnoti. All the objects entering into him gains peace. The wise person into whom all the objects enter gains peace. Gains peace means it doesn't cause any agitation in the person. There are two adjectives describing the ocean in this shloka. The first one, apuryamanam, refers to the ocean being totally filled with water, complete with water. It requires no more water to be full because it is already filled to the brim. The second adjective, achala pratishtam, describes the ocean as not moving from place to place in the same way that a river does, for example. The ocean is not only full, but being without motion, it is also well grounded. The verse also gives some more information about the ocean. While a pond depends upon a source of water for its existence, the ocean doesn't depend upon any other source of water for its fullness. It doesn't depend on the rain for its oceanness, unlike the rain clouds that depend on the evaporation or the ocean water for their cloudness. Now the ocean doesn't depend on any entry of water. It doesn't become an ocean because the water enters into it. Thus, to be brimful, it depends on no other factor, no other source of water. The glory of the ocean is then within itself alone. Water enters the ocean from all sides in the form of rain and rivers. But does the entry of these various forms of water bring about any change in the fullness of the ocean? If it does, then we can say that the ocean is not full, that it depends upon other sources for its oceanness. And if no change is brought about by the water entering into it, then the ocean is full by itself, and the non-entry of water will make no difference in its fullness. By itself, the ocean is full of water because it doesn't depend upon any other source of water for its fullness. Neither the non-entry nor the entry of water makes any difference to it. The ocean is not after the entry of water, nor is it afraid of water entering into it. It has no fear of becoming flooded, thereby losing its name, ocean. Nor, in order to be ocean, does it covet water. A pond, on the other hand, doesn't depend upon rain or some other, does depend upon rain and some other water to be a pond. If a pond is dependent upon a particular spring underneath it, for instance, all that is required for it not to be pond is for someone to put borewells all around. The water table will go down, the spring will go dry, and there will be no water in the pond. A pond also can cease to be a pond if too much water enters into it. If its banks are broken, there will be water everywhere. No one will know where the pond is unless they are wading the water and suddenly step into it. Therefore, a pond will no longer be called a pond if there is too much water entering into it or if no water enters into it at all. Such changes are possible for a pond, whereas an ocean undergoes no change whatsoever, regardless of whether water enters or doesn't enter. Similarly, the vice person also. Just as the fullness of the ocean is not affected by the entry or non-entry of water, so too the wise person's peace of mind is not affected by the objects that enter the mind. These objects enter into such a person just as water enters the ocean. But he or she is not affected by them because, like the ocean, the wise person is full for no other reason than fullness being his or her own nature. Everyone has this sense of fullness, if only for the time being, when something desirable happens. But eventually, the person finds himself or herself not full. A wise person, on the other hand, doesn't depend on anything for his or her fullness because the self is already full, like the ocean. The Atma is Ananda, it has no limit. Thus, the recognition of the Atma is a very reason for the person's being dull. I am is fullness. I am fullness. If I am fullness, then the meaning of the word I is not found in a limited factor like the body, mind, or the senses. Therefore, the I should be understood as it is, and it happens to be Ananda. The wise person is one who is happy without depending upon any object or situation. Like the ocean, he or she is full by his or her own glory, by his or her own nature. The fullness of a wise person, the ananda of the person is not going to increase because of the entry of some desirable objects. And if such desirable objects do not enter, the wise person doesn't lose anything. In either case, no change is brought about in the person. He or she remains unchanged. If desirable objects enter into the head of a person who is not full, they create havoc in the person because they have to be gained, experienced, or owned, and there may be no way of doing it. So, therefore, the person smarts, sweats, threats, and fumes. When a person looks upon himself or herself as one who is lacking, desires only cause problems. And if such a person is told to give up all desires, he or she cannot do it. Unless one is full, desires cannot be given up. They go away only when the person is full. Even if desires do enter the head of the wise person, they don't create any problems because whether the desires are fulfilled or not, it is all the same to the person. The demise of one's emotional yo-yo. The word kama in this shloka is meant to mean objects. Kamyate iti kamaha. They are desired, therefore they are called kama. Those objects which are desired referred to by the word kama. If a person doesn't know that he or she is ananda, the person is elated when desirable objects enter and dejected when undesirable objects enter. Whereas for the wise person, there is no difference. He or she is shanti alone, meaning that there is no change in the person whatsoever. The emotional yo-yo is no longer there for him or her. There may be a ripple of laughter or even roaring laughter, sometimes just as a ocean seems to be very ecstatic at certain times and simply smiling at other times. There can be a smile, a laugh, or tranquility. For the ocean, the small waves are its smiles, and the huge breakers are its roaring laughter. If it is not roaring with laughter or smiling, is the ocean gone? No, it is tranquil in its fullness. Therefore, it is a fullness that is laughing, the fullness already being there. It can be a laughing fullness, a smiling fullness, or a tranquil fullness. The other person mentioned in the shloka, the Kamakami, is one who has desires. This is not to say that he or she has a desire for desires. No one wants to have a desire for desires, but this person definitely has desires for desirable objects. Into this person's mind, sense objects enter, the world enters. When the desirable enters, there is elation. When the undesirable enters, there is depression. In this way, the emotions of the person go up and down like a yo yo. If a wise person can be likened to an ocean, the other wise person can be likened to a miserable pond that we just saw in the example. When the rains come, there will be water. Provided there is not too much water or too little water, the pond will remain. But if it is flooded or all its water dries up, the pond is gone. Similarly, for the one who has binding desires, the entry and the non entry of desirable and undesirable objects bring about changes, which is not the case for the wise person. This shloka then gave Arjuna some hope. The previous shloka was a real description of a wise person, in the sense that it takes wisdom for you to be wise, and therefore you had better gain this wisdom. This was then followed by the illustration in the present shloka, which likened the wise person to an ocean. Let all desirable and undesirable objects enter like so much water into the ocean. The wise person remains full, whereas the Kamakami doesn't. Krishna was telling Arjuna here that the one who has binding desires will always have problems. And that by this illustration, Arjuna would know what a wise person is like. Having said this, when Bhagavan Krishna then summed up the section on the Sita Prajna as well as the entire chapter in the next two shlokas, the last two shlokas of this chapter, shloka number 71. Vihaya kaman yas sarva
विहाय कामान्य सर्वान्
pumanscharati nispragaha
पुमांश्चरति निःस्पृहः
nirmamo nirahankaraha
निर्ममो निरहङ्कारः
sashantim adhigacchati.
स शान्तिमधिगच्छति.
Vihaya avyaya. Be purvaka ha dhatu ho ha tyage. Then lep pratyaya. Vihaya, having given up kaman, the desires. Yaha, the one, sarvan, all the kamans. The one who gives up all the kamans. Binding the kama here is binding desires. Yaha puman, the one who. Puman is naraha, manushyaha. Puman sharati, this pragaha, he moves around without spragha, without desire. Nirmamaha, no mamakara. Nirahankaraha, no ahankara, without the sense of this I-ness, limited I-ness. So, mamakara, my, ahankara, I, not there. Saha shantim adhigacchati, he gains peace. Swarupa shanti, he discovers, he revels in his shanti, it's atma, which is shanta, swarupa. Its swarupa is shanti, gains peace. The wise person, having given up all binding desires, the person who moves around, nispragaha, devoid of longing, without a sense of limited I, nirahankaraha and mind, mamakaraha, gains shantihi, gains peace. The wise person is one who has given up all binding desires and who moves freely in the world. Whether the person is a king like Janaka or a sannyasi like Shankaracharya, there is no difference in the freedom of the person. The longing for this or that is gone because a person is happy with himself or herself. There is no more longing for situations in order to be secure and happy. Therefore, the sense of mind is no longer there. Such a person doesn't have this kind of attachment to anything or anyone. People hold on to certain people and certain objects and look upon them as mine. They are like children who say, don't touch this, don't take it away from me. This is my toy. The only difference between the mind we had as children and the mind we have as adults is that the toys have been replaced with the other, more sophisticated objects. In fact, we are nothing but bearded grown-up children. The mindness never goes, only objects are replaced. Thus, with reference to a few things and people, we say this is mine. There is no I or mine. However, when I see that the whole think everything is myself alone. Everything changes. I am the father, the mother, and all the places. When everything is myself, there is no mine. Mine means that yours is or hers are also there. These are the reasons for all your problems. You become small in your own eyes. When I and mine are no longer there, because you know I am all of this, you are wise. When you say I am all of this, the sense of mine is gone. The I sense is also gone because when everything is me, there is no I. People think this is vanity, but vanity only exists when you are small. When you say I am everything, there is no vanity. Vanity is only with reference to comparison and pride. When you take yourself to be this much, there is quantifying in terms of your possessions, your capacity, your skills, and so on. Then there is agankara, ego. When the ego is bloated to such an extent that I am everything, there is no agankara at all. There is only reality, knowledge, Brahma. Agankara is nothing but a notion, the I notion. When the reality, I am everything, there is no ego. Ego is there. Ego is only when you compare yourself to another person and say, he doesn't have as much I have. Is ego. But there is no other ego, but there is no other person at all. All that is there is me, myself alone. There is no ego, no doer, there is only agam, I. That I am a doer is a notion, whereas I is the self. Therefore, the person under discussion in this shloka is one who has no I or mind sense, because everything is himself or herself. If everything is oneself, where is the question of having a desire? Knowing this, then the wise person has no binding desires. Our wise person lives in the world. The use of the word charity here is very beautiful. The wise person doesn't run away from the world. Where would he or she go away? Having given up all binding desires, such a person continues to live in the world and may engage himself or herself in a variety of activities. But the activity itself means nothing. The person gains only shanti, meaning that he or she never changes. Other people move around because of the pressure of the desires, whereas a wise person is free from such binding, pressurizing desires. Who are impelled by desires will say, this has to be done, only then I can be happy. The only difference between a wise person and these people is that the wise person is motivated but not driven by his or her desires. In spite of moving around and being active in the world, there is no appreciable inner change brought about in the person either by desire or by its outcome. When the world enters into the Siddha Prajna, the person is Shanta. When he or she enters into the world engaging the activities of the world, then also there is nothing but Shanti. This was said because of a doubt that can arise here. It is fine to say that the Siddha Prajna is full, and the world enters into such a person, it merely resolves into his or her fullness. He or she just sits one place in this fullness, and whatever the world enters into the person, Shanti alone provides. But what about the wise person who is active? Activity doesn't change the person's wisdom. There is no change because there is no doership or enjoyership. No I notion in the person. Shanti alone remains. Let the person be engaged in the world and let the world enter into the person. Either way, it is same because he or she is enjoying or doing that is Shanti. When the world enters into the person or the person does something, he or she doesn't become an enjoyer or a doer. Enjoyership and doership are both negated in the wise person. Although there is a seeming enjoyership and doership, essentially they are not there. This is what we call badita, meaning that through knowledge, the reality of doership and enjoyership centered on I is sublate. When Krishna talked to Arjuna and when Shankaracharya wrote his commentaries, there was doership. But neither Krishna nor Shankaracharya looked upon themselves as a doer. Doership of the wise person is just doing. The notion I am the doer is not there. This means Chittaprajna continues to be Brahma. Therefore, Bhagavan concluded last shloka 72. We will do it in next class. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. धन्यवाद.